Hello, everyone. I am Julie Zuckerman, author of the Book of Jeremiah, and welcome to the June Literary Modiin author event. Today is day 625 of our interminable reality and day 10 of our even newer reality with Iran. Fingers crossed that we will not have an alert and an attack here during this session, but if we do, I'm going to take the computer with me to my mamad, to my safe room, and hopefully we can carry on without any interruption. And you just might hear the lovely sounds we hear from our phones. Anyway, every day here is very complex, and I know that you join with me in the fervent hope that we'll see all 50 of our hostages home and everyone in this region to be able to live in peace and dignity. That number has just come down by 3 today, for those who haven't heard, thanks to our heroic soldiers who returned Ofra Kedar, Jonathan Cimarano, and Shai Levinson, so that their families can bury them with proper respect. May their memories be a blessing. And at the end of the session, I'll say a few more words about that. But now I'd like to turn to our main event, something joyful, and that is the release of new Jewish books in the world. I think most of you have been here before, but for those who don't know, Literary Modiin started before the pandemic as a way to bring local Israel-based authors to the large community of English readers here in Modiin. And we had several in-person events, and then with the pandemic, we've switched to Zoom, and now occasionally we have back to in-person events. And this is our 62nd event, so hooray for that. The format is that each author will speak for about 15 minutes, and then we open it up to questions. And we have a large attendance, so everyone is on mute, but you can put your questions in the chat box or any other comments. If you have technical difficulties, just send a private note in the chat to me. So now I will introduce our first author. Emanuela Barasch Rubinstein is a fiction writer and scholar in the humanities. After publishing 3 academic books on the cultural interpretation of Nazism and the Holocaust, she turned to fiction. She has published 3 works of fiction in English: 5 Selves, a collection of short stories; Delivery, a novel exploring various aspects of childbirth; and Intimate Solitude, a novel that examines the transformation of Israeli society since 1968. A nonfiction book, Women Managers in American Popular Culture, is forthcoming from Routledge in July 2025. Also, she lives in Tel Aviv and is the mother of 3 young men. So, Emanuela, I'm going to spotlight you and take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Julie. Thank you very much. So I just go with the book. Okay, so this is my book, Intimate Solitude. It was published in September 2024 in a publisher in Boston, academic studies publisher. And the book is an historical novel. It follows the changes within the Israeli society from 1968 pretty much until today. Okay, as I'm sure you know, many Israeli fiction books are centered on the military conflict, and there's no better time to see how relevant it is these days. However, my novel is completely focused, or almost completely focused, on the inner tensions within Israeli society. Okay, so there are Ashkenazis and Sephardi, there are religious and non-religious people, people from Tel Aviv, people from Jerusalem, but the focus of the novel is the change from a socialist society to a capitalistic one. Okay, in 1968, when the plot begins, Israel is completely, socialist. Everything is centered, everything is decided by the government. Whereas today it is, I'm sure you know, a super capitalistic society. Okay. I just want, just not to use vague words. How do I see this transformation? Okay. Let's assume that within each and every one of us, there is an inner scale. And on the one hand is On the one hand is, on the one side is our sense of, belonging to a certain society, feeling part of it. And on the other side is self-fulfillment, individualism, focusing completely on our own career ambitions. And the transformation is that gradually, from being the weight being on one side, it is moving slowly to a place where it is on the other side. This transformation, in my view, has far-reaching consequences on an individual level, on a social level, political level. It affects almost every aspect of our lives. So let me tell you a little bit about the protagonist in the book. There are three main protagonists: Ophir, Ben, and Lori. Okay. Ophir and Ben are two childhood friends from Jerusalem. Ophir is Ashkenazi, and he's good looking, and he's part of what was at the time the elite, and his father is well connected. He knows everyone. He can, arrange anything. He joins the army, and he's in the paratroopers. He's a paratrooper, very much the winner at the time, and also extremely talented, imaginative, and so on. His friend Ben is half Ashkenazi, half Sephardi. His father is Sephardic, and he has this constant sense of being discriminated, okay? The mother is Ashkenazi, and Ben is always oscillating between, the Western set of values and religious, traditional set of values. Okay. As they become friends from a very young age, I would like to say the tensions between them have always been there. Okay, they did not, they were not created 20 years later. No, already when they were children, there's this tension. He's the winner. I'm not the winner. I'm the loser. He's the one everyone loves. I'm the one. But in a society where everyone feels so much part of something bigger than themselves, they can somehow encompass, they can handle the tensions between them. Time passes by, they go to the university, one studies economics, the other computer science, and they decide to start a startup firm for medical equipment. So they're it's very difficult at the beginning, there are hurdles that they need to pass. But gradually, they're doing extremely well. I mean, everything is going fantastic. The business is going fantastic. They're doing well. They make like money. They send, equipment to all over. But the process in which each and every one of them is all about self-fulfillment is in a way destroying the relationship between them. Okay, if you are only about yourself and about fulfilling yourself and about, doing professionally fantastic, it erodes the friendship with childhood friendship. Okay, it creates a distance between yourself and other people. Okay, and the distance is gradually growing. No spoilers until at a certain point there's a big crisis between them, and they are about completely to lose, whatever they have achieved, just because of this, need of each and every one of them to fulfill their own personal ambitions. At the end, I would have to say, they managed to create a new relationship. The new relationship is completely different. There's no, this intimacy that was there between them is gone. Okay, this is about, interest. This is about working the firm together. This is about succeeding. Again, they're doing fantastic, but on an emotional level, it is something completely different. Okay, so the novel just, I know it's fiction. Okay, definitely fiction. Nothing, all the characters, but to me, it felt a little bit like a documentary. It's in a way trying to document this procedure, this historical process within Israeli society. I would just like to add that the process is, in my view, relevant to all segments of society. It happens to Ashkenazis, it happened to Sephardic, it happens to religious people, it happens to secular people. It's something way bigger than us, okay? So every one of them reacts a little bit different because they come from a different society, but the process is happening to everyone, okay? Eventually there's huge success, but they are bound to ask, what did we lose? What did we lose on the way? Okay, so the capitalistic world offered them huge opportunities, which they did things that they could never imagine they could do. But at the same time, they are aware of the fact that they have lost something on the way. I just want to be, I'm not sure. There's another protagonist, Laurie. Okay, Laurie is an immigrant from the UK. She has decided to come to Israel. She marries a fear, I can say that. And through this character, I examined two things. First, how would a foreigner fit into this society that is in the process of changing? I mean, where would you find her place? And the other thing, which I actually find fascinating, and I encountered this, is the very complex attitude of world Jewry to Israel. Okay, I encountered this over and over and over again. And I have to say, from an Israeli perspective, correct me if I'm wrong. I really may be wrong because I am Israeli. There is always something unbalanced about the way world Jewry see Israeli or feel towards Israelis. If they are against, they like really, they could hate Israel. If they're for, they are, they like Israel so much to the point that they're not critical anymore, the way they should be. I mean, there's always a sense after October 7th, people that were, unrelated to Israel suddenly felt. So this is all also in the background, how world Jewry, it's a very soft spot and it's very emotional and it's very difficult. And somehow I get this feeling often that it's difficult to find the exact right place that you need to be. Okay, you can be critical, but not against. You can, you could be for, but still be critical. So through this character, I also examine this aspect. Julie, am I late? So have I time to read one page for this? All right. So what I will read, I'm not a very good reader, so we will forgive me, but what I read is Ben and Ophir are undergoing like a really profound process. And at a certain point, Ben, and when they're in this, they just want to succeed. They want to do it. They want to make it. And suddenly he's in a point that he thinks maybe it wasn't worth it. Okay, maybe it wasn't worth it. I mean, so this is for the first time in his life, Ben wondered if the wheel could be turned back. The practical spirit that provided support in moment of weakness, spurring him into rushing forwards, inventing, achieving, and removing whoever stood in his way, suddenly seemed shallow and unimaginative. His father's words about men caring only for himself and for his family, which he always believed to be innocent and profound, were now aggravating. Money, a comfortable life, Handex is the name of the company, success, all diminishes as he recalls Ophir blank eyes. He calmly suggested firing some workers who had been with them for years, Abraham and Nava included, so to save the costs. Resentment gradually transformed into animosity. Through Ben's face revealed anger. He couldn't tell who he was mad at. He sat at the balcony and looked down at the dark, empty street. Cats laid on the pavement, indifferent to prey hiding in the bushes. Suddenly, a strange idea came into being. He would apologize to Ophir, ask for forgiveness, try to appease him. explain how years of envy impaired his judgment and made him betray his best friend, the other part of himself. Forgiveness was the answer, the solution. Even in Yom Kippur, there is no atonement for transgression between people unless they forgave each other. To remove the blank look of his childhood friend, a pardon is needed. Maybe he would suggest a good deed. A good deed is compensation, a joint effort for those in need in Israel or somewhere in remote places around the globe. Perhaps they could build a hospital, a school. After all, they have created handicks together. But the fierce blank eyes in the darkness, two murky holes in the sky, looked back at him with utter indifference and maybe even a touch of scorn. Hospital? School? In a moment, he would burst out laughing at these ideas and suggest that they start a new company that would do even better than Hendrix. A brilliant, original idea they could execute together. Ben stared down at the street, which seemed motionless at this early morning hours. Clouds didn't move the skies. Leaves didn't rustle. Night birds didn't soar. An insect didn't crawl in the dark. Complete silence, stillness. Even the air, which seems to be full of mist and dust, was stagnant. And from the utter silence loomed an echo of a grim solitude that enveloped him until he could hardly breathe. A heartbreaking moan, like a weeping trumpet emerging from a dirty, deserted street corner. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. That was great.
I'm good with time. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emanuela. And I have to say, when I was reading your book, I felt very familiar. So much of it felt very familiar, even though when I got here in the mid 90s, it was already like there wasn't that much of the socialist, part left. It was all straight into high tech. But I really appreciated reading your book and the descriptions you had of certain places. It felt so real to me.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me introduce our next author. Margot Singer is the author of a novel, Underground Fugue, and a linked short story collection, The Pale of Settlement. She is also the co-author with Nicole Walker of Bending Genre, Essays on Creative Nonfiction. She is the recipient of the Flannery O'Connor Award, the Edward Lewis Wallant Award, the Reformed Judaism Prize, the Glasgow Prize, the James Jones First Novel Fellowship, as well as grants from the NEA and the Ohio Arts Council. A professor of creative writing at Denison University. She lives with her family in Granville, Ohio, and she's going to be talking to us about her new memoir, Secret Agent Man. So let me spotlight you, which just came out like last week. When did it come out?
Yeah, last week.
Okay. Mazel tov.
Thanks. We good? All right. Thank you so much, Julie. And thanks for inviting me to join this group and talk with all of you today. Yeah, book came out a week ago on Father's Day, which, as you'll see, is sort of appropriate. Thanks, Danny and Emanuela, for joining me, and to all of you for zooming in. If my anxiety and neurotic news checking could keep everybody safe, you'd be totally fine. And I'm here in my office in Central Ohio, where we only have tornado sirens occasionally, but my heart is really with all of you in Israel. My father grew up in Haifa, where I still have many relatives. I spent most of my childhood summers there, back in the good days, Emanuela, the 60s and 70s, pre-capitalism, visiting with my grandparents and my cousins. And even though I did an intensive summer ulpan after my sophomore year of college, I really never learned to speak much Hebrew. My grandparents were German-speaking Yekes from Czechoslovakia, and even as children, my cousins were way more fluent in English than I could ever hope to be in Hebrew. And so while I was never exactly a tourist in Israel, I was no Israeli, and at the same time at home, we were Jewish, but we were not at all religious. We had no connections at all to the American Jewish community. I didn't find out what a JCC was till I was grown up. And, just we hung out with a small group of Israeli expats who were friendly with my father. And so I felt sort of that I didn't belong anywhere exactly, that I was always in between. And it was many, many years later that I came to understand that this kind of in-between space is actually a very writerly place to be. So this is a pretty thin book. It's a collection of personal essays that are linked. You could call it a memoir and essays. I wrote it piecemeal over many years. The essays grapple with these kinds of questions of identity and belonging, of Jewishness and womanhood and family and memory and home. Where do we come from? Where do we belong? What do we know about our loved ones, about ourselves? And I find that more than with my fiction, I think of myself primarily as a fiction writer, but I tend to write nonfiction essays. They tend to come out of a place of not knowing. From thorny questions or emotional knots. I think that my essays, essay in the French sense of the word essayer, to try or attempt. They emerge associatively, almost always in short linked segments, kind of like a pattern of beads strung on a thread. And I really love braiding together images, memories, research, kind of that juxtaposition of unlike but related things. And the meanings I find emerge often to my own surprise in the friction, the layers, and the seams. So this collection took a really long time to come together. I was sort of embarrassed about it till I went to a conference recently and discovered that all the other writers that had similar collections also took a really long time to put them together. And the title essay, Secret Agent Man, is one of the reasons for that. And I apologize if you know the Johnny Rivers song, it will now be stuck in your head for the next week. The Secret Agent Man. I wrote the first version a long time ago, more than 20 years ago, and it came out of a joking exchange I had with my husband over my father's perpetual evasiveness about what he did. He was always muttering and mumbling vague things about his work as a consultant or various projects he had in Israel and around the world, and you could never pin him down. And when I was really little, my American cousins would occasionally come up and ask in a whisper whether he worked for the Mossad. And I always laughed them off because I think Americans always seem to think that all Israelis are secret agents. And I was pretty sure real spies kind of didn't really go around hinting about their clandestine activities. And in any case, the essay was much more about my spying on him and him spying on me, about really the perpetual mystery of parents and children than about anything else. And I had absolutely no intention of showing this essay to my father, who read, the Wall Street Journal. But I did send it out, and a small literary magazine called Third Coast picked it up. And it didn't occur to me that he might find out about it. This was before the internet was really a big thing. I mean, it existed, but everything wasn't on it. And then he found out. So a few months after it was published, I got an email from my father, and he wrote, quote, "I have been informed by my Mossad contacts that you have published a story in the Third Coast Spring 2005 issue. The Mossad claims it might jeopardize my future cover. Was the story published as they claim?" So I found this completely baffling and mystifying. I had no idea how he found out. And I was completely mortified, not honestly so much because of the Mossad, but because of the way I'd poked fun at my father in the essay. Specifically, and this is a spoiler, but I mentioned something that was completely taboo in our family. No one ever spoke about it. And it was the fact that he wore a hairpiece, a toupee. I called it a blown cover in plain sight in the essay. I was just so embarrassed and sorry that I had probably embarrassed my father. The Third Coast magazine probably has like 12 readers. So I wasn't really all that worried. It was not exactly a large readership. It wasn't online, but I was really ashamed and really worried. I mean, I'd heard so many cautionary tales of people who had sort of trashed their relationships with loved ones over their writing. So thinking I was being very clever, I told my father that the story was classified information. And then he cleverly told me that he'd already sent off his check for $8 and was waiting for his copy to arrive in the mail. So anyway, I was very lucky. My father was a generous man, and he called me sometime later and told me that I wrote very well and that I'd gotten some of my facts wrong. And I was too ashamed, honestly, to ask him what exactly I'd gotten wrong. And we didn't talk about it again for over a decade. And now in hindsight, I actually think he was rather proud of what I wrote, but I didn't have the courage to send the collection out to publishers until after he was gone. The collection begins and ends with my father. The last essay, which is the most recent one that I wrote, is called Counterclockwise. It's about my parents' aging and my father's death. He passed away in April of 2023. And other essays look back on my life as a management consultant, on past relationships, on the challenges of being a woman and a mother. The essays trace moves I've made over the years. I grew up in Boston and lived in England, New York, Utah, and now Ohio. There's one essay called A Natural History of Small Town Ohio that looks at what it's like to be a Jew in a small Midwestern village with a Protestant church on every corner of Broadway and Main Street. Another essay, God's Eye, seeks perspective through the lenses of aerial photography and archaeology and psychoanalysis. If you're a classical music fan, there's even a piece called Ghost Variations about the young Johannes Brahms. And above all, I think these are essays about the importance of family and home and how our understanding of family and home change with the passage of time. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the title essay, and then I'll be done. So, Secret Agent Man, 1. Spies dress in black and carry attaché cases. They may disguise themselves as diplomats, business executives, exotic dancers, academics, scientists, consultants, epileptics, holy men. Spies possess their own geometry.
They have Margot, I'm going to interrupt you for a second because it became a little hard to hear you.
Oh.
So maybe strange. Just lean forward into the microphone.
Okay.
I don't know. Am I the only one that's having a hard time? No, I don't know. Okay. Sorry. Start again.
Start over?
Yeah. Okay. Start over from the reading. Oh, that's better.
Okay. I'm going to hold the book in a different place. Maybe it was covering the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Always in a mysterious place on computers.
Yeah.
If I look sideways, that's why. All right. 1. Spies dress in black and carry attaché cases. They may disguise themselves as diplomats, business executives, exotic dancers, academics, scientists, consultants, epileptics, holy men. Spies possess their own geometry. They have a dimension, volume, angles, planes, a surface, and an underneath. Spies listen through keyholes. They squint through one eye. Spies collect passports, languages, bugs, maps, lovers, offshore bank accounts, gadgets, covers, ciphers, names. A spy is a trick of perspective. If a spy turns sideways, he may disappear. Spies used to send dispatches from clandestine 32-pound radio transmitters, but not anymore. Spies may be sleepers, dangles, walk-ins, plants, special agents, station chiefs, or moles. They may be single or double. They may be blown or burned. Spies never go to AA meetings. Spies don't talk about the past. Spies disappear into the background. They wear button-up shirts and reading glasses, just like all your father's friends. You can poke your finger through a spy. He will scatter like ash. 2. My father had the kind of face people thought they'd seen somewhere before. My high school friends thought he looked like Ricardo Montalban on Fantasy Island. A boyfriend thought he looked like George H.W. Bush. When in his 20s, he wore a thin mustache, people said he looked like Clark Gable. Once I came across his double in a glossy magazine. I flipped a page and did a double take. There he was with a drink in one hand. It was an advertisement for Pernod. A cigarette in the other, wearing a black turtleneck and a houndstooth blazer, his legs crossed jauntily. I cut up the picture and sent it out to him. He laughed and pinned it on the corkboard over his desk at home, where it still hangs, curling at the edges and pocked with pushpin holes next to a drawing of a sailboat I made when I was 9 or 10 that says, "I love you, Daddy," inside a crayoned heart. 3. My father was born in Czechoslovakia, but immigrated with his family to Palestine in 1940 when he was 9. He spoke English with an accent as a result, a mixture of German and Czech and Israeli with a vaguely British lilt. When I was growing up, he wore Brioni suits, smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and drove a Porsche. He traveled a good deal on business to places like New York and Tel Aviv, Tokyo and Cairo, Dhaka and Dubai. Exotic visitors passed through our home, a diplomat from Dahomey, an Egyptian textile magnate, the Indian musician Bismillah Khan and his troupe who gave a concert by our swimming pool, a Japanese executive, a Polish painter, and a steady stream of Israeli expats like himself. In the preppy Boston suburb where I grew up, he wasn't like anybody else's dad. Who was he? Not American, really, no longer Czech nor European, not even Israeli exactly, although this is what I usually said if someone asked. He tended to be evasive on this point. He told no childhood stories. He seemed to have little interest in the past. We teased him for saying birthday instead of birthday and mixing up the words for fingers and toes. But English was the only language we spoke at home, the language he used with his German-speaking parents and his Hebrew-speaking relatives and friends. My mother liked to tell a story about a time a business associate came to dinner who spoke only French, a language my father had never learned. My mother, who had studied French in high school, did her best, but the conversation, understandably, was strained. She was in the kitchen, she says, when a roar of laughter erupted from the dining room. Exactement, she heard the Frenchman exclaim. Tu me comprends parfaitement. You understand me perfectly. I will never know, my mother said, what your father said to that man and whether he actually understood anything at all. 4. It is said that espionage is the world's second oldest profession. The 4th book of Moses tells how 2 of Joshua's spies were saved by the prostitute Rahab, who hid them on her roof, helping to bring the walls of Jericho tumbling down. The Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose III smuggled spies and flour sacks into the besieged city of Jaffa in 1468 BCE. Warring princes in the 12th century Japan used ninja as spies and silent assassins. The word ninja comes from the Japanese for to make yourself invisible. Medieval troubadours spied by eavesdropping as they entertained noblemen in their castles. Since Canaanite times, traders and businessmen have kept their eyes and ears open on their travels and reported back on what they observed. I'll read one last short section and then I'll be done. I'm just going to skip ahead. 6. My father worked as an independent consultant. He maintained a long-term contract with the Boston-based consulting firm Arthur D. Little, and every once in a while, he'd take me with him into work. The firm's offices were in a modern industrial office park with glass-walled sky bridges and echoing stairwells with open metal treads. My father had a dim, narrow shoebox office with a bookshelf along one wall and a desk along the other. The books on the shelves were about textile engineering and entrepreneurship and innovation, his areas of expertise. Many of the spines had Hebrew lettering, which I couldn't read. He'd doodle on a pad of graph paper as he talked on the phone, enclosing words in boxes or underlining or retracing them. He wrote in a mixture of upper and lowercase letters, loopy and hard to decipher. Sometimes I could make out numbers or a cryptic phrase. On the days I'd tag along, he'd make a few phone calls while I colored or read, and then he'd walk me up and down the corridors to meet his colleagues, men in open-collared shirts with pocket protectors and aviator glasses. I'd stand there twisting onto the outside of my shoes or picking at my nails as he bragged about my grades and my piano playing to the other men. Then he took me to the cafeteria for lunch. It astonished me that my father ate in a cafeteria so similar to the one we had at school, serving the same kind of typically American food we never ate at home. After lunch, he packed his pens and papers into his briefcase and we drove home again. My father never seemed to work very hard. In fact, he often proudly proclaimed that he never worked for anyone other than himself and never for more than 9 months out of every year. It seemed clear that he made plenty of money anyway. I considered him very important and successful. Of course, I had no clue about what he really did. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great and such an amazing essay, and the whole collection is beautiful. All right. I'm going to introduce our 3rd author. Danny Goodman's writing has appeared in Electric Literature, Catapult, Monkey Bicycle, and elsewhere, and he has been the recipient of fellowships from Longleaf Writers Conference and Rivendell. He earned his MFA in fiction from the University of New Orleans, where he was a 2-time winner of the Samuel Mockbee Award. A beautiful, most anticipated debut book of 2024 called Compelling and a Strong Debut by the Jewish Book Council. His award-winning debut novel, AMERIKALAND, is out now. He's currently at work on a new novel, and he lives in New York's Hudson Valley with his wife, a book editor, and their editorial cats. So, Danny, let me spotlight you. Okay, take it away.
Wonderful. Everyone hear me okay? Good sound? Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you, Julie, Margot, Emanuela. Thank you so much for having me here. This is wonderful. And of course, thinking about everybody there constantly. And I feel especially honored to get to do this and just sort of bring a moment of calm and literature to all of this. So as mentioned, this is my debut novel. Ooh, right in the middle, it blurred. I'm sorry. I never know how to make it not blur. It's called AMERIKALAND. It came out almost just over a year ago. It came out June 4th of last year, and has been a wonderful ride to be on. A small press in upstate New York published it. And I spent a good portion of last summer and fall getting to, talk about the book and read from it, which was pretty surreal experience. It was my, again, first time getting to do all of that, and it was very exciting. Um, AMERIKALAND is a book about a lot of things kind of at once. It's been hard to nail it down when describing it for people or talking about it. Uh, some people call it a sports novel. The two main characters are professional athletes. Um, the book itself takes place in a what I would call a alternate present day. It had started in my initial drafts as a kind of a futuristic, slightly more dystopian futuristic book, and when I started the book in early 2017, that's very much what I thought I was writing. And the more I wrote into the book in the world of AMERIKALAND, it became clear that um, wasn't really a dystopian future. It was something much closer to reality. Uh, by accident and by terrible accident, that truth was becoming apparent. So the novel is really more of an alternate present day in a various ways. It takes place primarily in New York City, though it does kind of travel the globe. There's a lot set in Florida. There's a good portion of the book set in Berlin, but most of the books takes place in New York City. Um, and it's a New York City that is very recognizable to most of us, but there are some things that are changed. A few kind of details. Um, a large one that's not explicitly stated, but becomes clear is that 9/11 didn't happen in this sort of reality, but a different sort of large scale event had occurred. Um, uh, the bridge, which we would know as the Brooklyn Bridge, but in the book is called the Roebling Bridge, was bombed, and that's alluded to multiple times in the book. So that's sort of the overall setting, and we sort of follow these two characters. Sandy Katzman is a Brooklyn-born uh, Jewish gay baseball player. He plays for the professional major league team that's based in Brooklyn in this world. And Sabine Helvega is a professional German tennis player, a champion German tennis player, who is sort of recovering from her own sort of personal difficulties as we sort of start the book and meet them. And the dual narratives keep them separate, though it becomes clear early on that they know each other just because they reference each other. The larger context of the start of the book is something called World Day. So there's been some violence in the world that, again, doesn't look entirely different from the violence that we sort of understand in our world. And there's been this sort of International Day of Peace declared called World Day, and there's a large in New York City in our world in Queens, where they hold the U.S. Open, the U.S. Open tennis tournament, and where the New York Mets baseball team play are adjacent to each other in a very large kind of sports complex in Queens, New York. And so this sort of mimics that, and there's a very large baseball stadium and a very large tennis center in Brooklyn. And they've all come together for World Day. And we follow both Sandy and Sabine kind of as they're coming back. Sandy is in his late 20s, and he's kind of dealing with the spotlight of being a Brooklyn-born kind of superstar baseball player, but also much like our world, a rarity in professional sports of having a very prominent Jewish athlete be kind of taking center stage. And so he's grappling with kind of stardom and both wanting to have his privacy, but also be recognized as kind of a superstar. And he's kind of struggling with that. Sabine is around the same age, but tennis players tend to start a little younger. So she's been at this a long time, and she is recovering. It's very hard to, I found that the more I talk about the book, it becomes complicated because the way it's written, everything is kind of a spoiler for something that happens later. And so I'm always very conscious of like what I say when I'm talking about the book, because I don't want to spoil anything, but I'll probably spoil a few things accidentally. So I apologize for that. But Sabine is recovering from, let's say, an unexpected violence that occurred to her, and is just kind of coming back on the court and struggling with her fans who and just sort of the fandom in general, which is a major component of the book, especially on Sabine's side, sort of the way that female athletes are treated by both fandom and by just kind of the world at large, and how that differs from, say, how male athletes are treated when they're in the spotlight. And so we sort of follow both of them as they're emerging into World Day and kind of coming to grips with that. And it's not a spoiler to say, because it's on the back of the book, that eventually World Day unfortunately climaxes with a very large scale terrorist attack that happens at this event. And both Sandy and Sabine are affected. They both survive, but they are both obviously greatly affected. Tens of thousands of people lose their lives in this event. It's a very sort of, kind of very large scale attack. And it's something that carries forward with them throughout the rest of the book. But really, they emerge from this, and the questions they both have are, what is my place sort of in this world now as a sports figure, as an athlete, as a person capable of galvanizing hope for just the regular populace, but also how there start to be details emerge of how they find that they're both connected, both geopolitically and closer to home, connected to these attacks, and trying to make sense of that. And eventually their narratives, weave, they're separate, but then they kind of weave together and come back apart again. And we follow them across the Atlantic, over into the UK, into Berlin, and then back to New York. And really, the primary what's the word? The let's say inciting incident in our world of writing this book was the election in 2016 here in the US. And as early as 2017, when I started writing the book, it was a way for me I was having a lot of fear and anxiety in general about all of it, everything that was occurring. But there was a real rise in anti-Semitic crime, anti-Semitism in the US, particularly, in the Northeast. There were several, there were shootings, there were a lot of just kind of day-to-day attacks. And these were really kind of fueled by a lot of the rhetoric that was becoming very commonplace, let's say, in just regular parlance, not necessarily, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, right? Not something that was not there before, but it was something that was a bit more shadowed. And, there was a quiet inside voice that was used. And now it was not. It was outside. It was right in front of us all the time. And living in New York City, I especially was confronted with it multiple times. The book actually started, there's a scene later in the book, and this doesn't really give anything away, but where Sandy is riding the subway, and he gets on, and there's a huge swastika drawn on the subway, and the inside of the subway. And he, obviously has a very strong reaction to it. And he's met by an older Black woman on the train who gives him hand sanitizer and helps him erase it from the wall. And this very much, the book in a lot of ways started with that moment for me, because that happened. I got on the subway in early 2017, and there was kind of a half wall swastika drawn in marker, and an older woman kind of helped me get it off the wall. And I remember sitting down afterwards. We didn't talk. We didn't say anything to each other, because that's, New Yorkers on the subway. We don't really talk to each other a ton. But the help was there, and it was such a powerful moment for me. And I remember thinking, this is the book. Like, this is sort of the start of the book for me. I had been developing these characters and trying to figure out really how the story was going to, the trajectory of that. And that really is kind of how it jumped out. So, there's a lot of spoilers after that. I don't really want to talk about any of it, but let's just say that the book gets wilder and wilder as it goes on. We learn a lot of wild things, and the sort of anti-Semitism is kind of at the center of that, and particularly as it relates to being an American Jew and sort of seeing the sort of culture around Sandy in particular change. If I have time, I was going to read like one page very quickly. It's the back half of a scene. So this is much later in the book. So this is a spoiler in the sense that this happens much later in the book. And this is one of the chapters where Sandy and Sabine are together, where they've come together. This is at a tournament, a tennis tournament in Florida. At the end of the tournament, Sandy and Sabine are together and they're trying to leave. And there's sort of been a lot of animosity back and forth about what's going on quietly. And then this scene represents kind of a kind of coming to the head, something more public that had not happened before up to this point. Sandy follows Sabine, but the distance between them remains. As they approach the exit, he hears a commotion coming from outside the main visitor gate. He shouts to Sabine, who continues on, and instead of following, he curves around the outer boundary of the complex. Voices become distinct as he gets closer, in organized chanting. He hears the words before he sees their source. Blood and soil, they cry. Blood and soil. Sandy moves faster, his steps and the cries in rhythm. He comes upon them from the side, a mass of white men, some brandishing signs and others with assault rifles draped across their bodies. He keeps his distance, inching closer to the center to see them in their totality. A small crowd has formed to watch, to record, to whisper, and to yell back. Sandy joins them, and soon, without him realizing it first, Sabine too. She grips his arm so tight he knows later there will be marks, an imprint of her fingertips. She's close to him, her hot breath on his neck. "We have to go," she says, nearly inaudible. He looks away from the men and their eyes lock. His lungs calcify as if he's turning to stone from the inside out. She fidgets under his gaze. And as the voices grow louder, he sees in Sabine, in her cavernous eyes and demanding expression, something he doesn't expect. She, like him, is afraid. But beyond that, underneath the fear, a reaction far more sinister to him, one of recognition. "Are these the men you told me about?" He slips his arm away from her. "I have no idea," she says through clenched teeth. But he knows they are, sees the emblem on their armbands, the rune Sabine described when they were in Berlin, a black phoenix. "What is all this?" "Please," she says, still somehow measured, "we have to go." Sandy hears the severity in her voice, its sincereness, but he won't leave. He returns to the men, to their boundless energy, what minds fueled by hate look like. He moves from the crowd, certain Sabine reaches for him as he does. With purpose, he steps closer to the men. They grow louder, their signs waving madly in the afternoon wind. "You will not replace us," they scream at him, at everyone willing to listen, each time more pronounced, the animal within them shaping the sounds into growls. Later, he'll remember Sabine's voice, the way she whispers to him, "It is happening." He'll wonder what she means, how she seems unmoored and expectant at once. He'll understand only that nothing will again make sense. A beacon has been lit. For now, though, he faces the creatures before him. His sheer presence, his existence, enrages them. Their mouths curved, snarled, and spitting. Sandy closes his eyes, absorbs everything. His flesh, this body, ablaze. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. That was great. Okay, I'm gonna add all of our authors back to the spotlight. And as you're all putting your questions and comments in the chat. Margot, ask the spotlight, ask you to unmute. And I think actually I wrote you, Danny, when I encountered you on Substack when you answered somebody's question, and then I must have heard about AmeriKALAND before, but then I looked at it again. I'm like, oh, you had me at Brooklyn-born Jewish baseball player. Like I immediately went out and ordered the book. And it's a wonderful book. So yeah, thank you all for your reading. And until people put any questions, and I have a few questions, and also I forgot to tell you guys this before, but feel free to ask each other questions. So Margot, you said something in your talk about the in-between space, which is a writerly place to be. And I thought that was a great phrase. And I was wondering if you could each touch on that, like what that means to you and how is that reflected in your writing? wants to go first?
I'll pass since I sort of already kicked it off.
Okay.
So
All
go
right,
ahead.
Danny, picking on you.
I was definitely struck by that idea. I loved both your readings, both of your work. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I definitely felt like, especially in the writing of the book, Sandy especially is he doesn't come from a particularly religious family, but he understands kind of that othering that's happened to him sort of his whole life. And early on in the book, his mom says to him at one point, um, Sandy has encountered a couple policemen who just sort of talk to him like he's one of them, like he's just like a Brooklyn baseball player, so he's one of them. And his mom sort of reminds him like, well, to them, you're not that kind of Jew. Like you're one of them in a way that makes them feel comfortable, but that they're also there investigating an anti-Semitic crime. So, and they've been making comments kind of on the anti-Semitic comments, and Sandy is really confused by that. And so it definitely made me think about, I know that when I was writing this, there was a lot of thought about that in-between space of just kind of being not really belonging in one space or the other as a character, for me as a writer, of being Jewish, but not being Israeli, but not being super religious, as a Jewish person, and just kind of where is the space where you feel accepted is the wrong word, but where I just feel like I land. And Margot, I totally agree that it definitely is a place of where I'm thinking about it a lot. And so like it definitely got injected into the character, quite a bit.
Emanuela, what about you?
I'm not sure this really answers, but as I progressed in writing, not only this book, I have learned to accept a strange process that you start a character and with a certain, idea what this character is going to do, be, express, and I just find them going somewhere else. I mean, despite my, intentions, it happens. What can I say? They develop in a different way. I want them to go one place and they develop in a completely different way. And I have just learned to, a certain humility and just let them go. Okay, if this is what's happening, there must be something more profound about it. Maybe something that I'm not aware of, but I need to, let them go. Be a touch of humility. If this is the character, if that's the inner logic, let it go. Let it go. Even though I did not plan it this way. So I
just want to add that the first book that I wrote is a collection of short fiction called The Pale of Settlement, stories mostly set in Israel. It came out in 2007. And at that time, I actually felt I knew there were a few other writers, sort of Americans writing about Israel, but from, a closer perspective, I guess, than just sort of, than the typical American perspective, maybe. But it wasn't until recently that I discovered that and I think it's really grown in the last 20 years, this community of writers who live in Israel, who speak English, who write in English, and that is the ultimate kind of in between space. But to find that community, I mean, Deborah Goldberg's on this call, and Erica Dreyfus and Elisa, thank you for coming. The Sammy Rohr Fellowship fellows and Sammy Rohr Prize community has been mind-blowing to me, to find people that sort of get where I'm coming from, who do such amazing work. And I just feel like this sort of grew up in a way around my own time of developing as a writer. I remember writing some kind of proposal 25 years ago about what I was working on, and looking for comps and for other writers. And it didn't seem to be very many. And I don't know if it's, the diaspora of Israelis around the world, or people making Aliyah or whatever, but, or Zoom, right? But I think there's so much work that comes out of that particular in-between space that I'm really grateful for that community and excited about.
And I'll just say that a lot of those Anglo writers in Israel are on this call right now. Many people that we've had on Literary Modiin. So thank.
Sorry. But I
Go ahead.
experienced this from the different direction. I mean, really on writing in Hebrew, I'm Israeli, it's my mother tongue, and I translate it into English. So I sort of feel it's, I don't know, it's the opposite way. I mean, you start from one and the translation into English connects me to this different one.
Yes, I remember when we had Maya Arad on last summer. And
Yeah.
she's writing about, Israeli expats in America. And it was like everything she said, I was like the mirror image, like I'm
Yeah.
living here. But anyway, so big shout out to everybody on the call, especially those of you who are having to run to not even to your mamad if you don't have one, but to, the Habima parking lot. Carolyn, glad you've been with us this whole time.
We're lucky this time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and everybody else here. So, and yeah, that I feel like the Anglo writer community here, that's like my those are my people. Like when you say, all right, where do you belong? What's the in-between place? Well, you guys are all with so okay. There was
Erica has a question for me.
Erica has a question.
She's asking if my mother has read the book yet. It's a great question, Erica. My mom is 91 and, she has no memory loss or any issues, but she's 91 and, she really misses my father. And it's funny, like she grabbed my advanced reader copy out of my hands. I didn't quite want it. I didn't feel quite prepared to give it to her. Although she'd read many of the essays over the years, the ones that had been published in journals previously. And, actually, I'm sorry, this is an anticlimactic answer. She didn't have much to say. She was just like, yeah. And then she kept wanting to talk about, there's an essay about the house that she's been living in since 1966 that we're kind of trying to get her out of, with mixed feelings, of course. And she really just wanted to talk about the house and how I got it right. And it was her special place and she didn't want to leave. And I said to her, so I just have to ask you, like, what do you think about Dad? And what do you know about, what he did or whatever? And she's like, I don't know. So she was no help. So that's all I got.
I have a question for Manuela, which is that this question that you wrestle with in the book between individualism and community. Do you think, well, actually, I don't know when, did you write some of it after October 7th?
No.
It was written
The book was
before.
ready 2 years earlier. So
anything, you could have changed anything in the post October 7th world? Not in terms of writing about what happened on October 7th, but the characters' perspectives and
okay, so there's certain a sense of togetherness in Israel. I mean, within the Israeli society. At the same time, I don't want to go into politics, but I think a lot of the things that are happening today in Israel and Israeli politics, I'll just say this very generally, are really a result of this process that people, in a society that consecrates self-fulfillment, especially when it's, when it boils down to money, okay, people will make choices that they did not make 30 years ago. And yes, I'm sorry to say that, but I see this around me, definitely. By the way, I don't think this is only an Israeli phenomenon. I mean, it's happening in the United States, in Europe. It's just, okay, I live here and this is my life and this is the society that I describe. It's not unique. Look around the world. You see United States today, things that, 30 years ago would be, I don't know, treason or whatever. Today are, they're fine. Yeah. I mean, people, I have like mixed feelings. I wrote this novel trying not to be judgmental, not to say I'm not for capitalism, I'm not against capitalism, as just sort of create a very round picture of it. Some of it is very, very good. It gives people opportunities to do things they could not imagine. But to be honest, there's another side, and this is the other side. And at some points in Israel, it seems a little bit like a disintegration of society, you know, that it's so about, you know, being a winner and doing all this money, and, you know, everyone, sometimes I fear, let's, you know, phrase it more carefully. I fear that it would lead to a certain disintegration of society. Okay, so to put it very carefully, because yeah. But it's not only Israeli. By the way, in the book, it also happens in the UK. The parents of, okay, I just say that the father of Laurie is a well-known businessman, and he's always a supporter of the Labour Party. Has been this way all, you know, forever. And suddenly he has this amazing economic opportunity from someone in Africa, and the money is huge, and he takes it because, you know, it's a lot of money. He can do a lot of that with the money. And we all are in the same place. You know what? We are, as a society, all of us in this same place. I'm not optimistic to where this is leading, to be honest, but okay. I'll be careful. I don't know, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. That's why my third iteration of my life, besides being a tech worker, my day job, and a writer is my vocation. Since October 7th, I think I maybe want to become a farmer and then go out and help in doing all the volunteering in the agricultural sector. That has really like restored some of my hope in humanity by meeting all these people from all over Israel and all over the world who've been coming to help. And it's a little hard for me the last week and a half. I haven't been able to go do that. So hopefully I'll get back to it soon.
Yeah.
Danny, I have a question for you. If I recall, in your alternate present day world that you created in AMERIKALAND, there's no mention of Israel. Am I right?
That's
Can you
correct.
explain why you made that choice?
It's an interesting choice. So there was, especially in the first draft, there was a little bit, there certainly was. But as I was editing and as I was working on kind of reshaping the book, especially in a more present day, it became, the book was it's so much about the experience of being in the US. That's really the primary focus. And in a lot of ways, it was, distracting is not a great word for it, but it was moving our attention as a reader to something different than had originally been intended, which was really to think about to look at the rise of anti-Semitism in the US as it relates to, and in so many ways, as we've learned over the last year plus, even more, the anti-Semitism in the US and the way that it is either focused or dispersed is very often totally unrelated to Israel and unrelated to anything that's not about white supremacy, white power. It's not about Nazism, as we're now seeing, you know, even more so in the forefront. And it felt very much like I needed to focus what was happening on the US, on the Sandy's American Jewish experience, separate from anything else. And as you know, because you've read the book, Julie, it goes a lot of places and there's a lot of ground covered. And at a certain point, I needed to heighten things in a way that was going to keep it focused. So that was really the decision. It was almost more a cold-blooded narrative decision to kind of just keep the story as focused as humanly possible on what was happening on the page. And again, the initial draft of it was 120,000, almost 130,000 words, and the book now is about 90,000 words. So a lot got moved around, and my wife is a editor at Simon and Schuster, and she um, took her red pen to the book, and it's so much better for it. But a lot of things, there was a kind of a backstory of Sandy's parents that was included in the initial draft that did delve into a little bit with Israel. There was a little bit of sort of that in there, but all of that ended up getting cut because it was just so far away from what was happening on the page. But again, having written the book, it's an interesting conversation, like Emanuela is talking about, having written this book a number of years ago, really the first draft. And then as more things happen and more things happen, there's definitely revisiting mentally of like, I remember a paragraph I wrote that I'm like, oh, I really wish that was still in the book, because it was a decision made, but now, as things have shifted, it was definitely really important. But yeah, that was really the ultimate decision. And was just kind of a tightening of the book, and a focus on the, again, American Jewish experience, which during the last few years has been so volatile and separated from a lot of what's happening internationally. Anyway.
A lot of sense. Can you just touch on what you said before about your wife taking the red pen and Xing out 40,000 words of your book? Can you talk about that for a second? What was that like?
Yes. I mean, as a writer, it was a wonderful, it's a gift, for me. It feels like a cheat code. If I was 25, I would say it was a hack, but I don't even know what that is, really, what a hack is, but it felt like a secret kind of thing to have her take the book. But it was, she gave me a lot of notes. That was really, she did it kind of great, very sort of softly, and she gave me a lot of notes. And from the notes, it was clear that there was a lot of the book that was working as text, that was working as, it's one thing, we talk about kill your darlings, and it's hard when your darlings become like a fourth of the book and you're sort of like, okay, there's much too much going on here. And that really was what was happening. It was just had really ballooned, and I was unable to sort of see how far off of the kind of path of the book it had gone. And when she got into it, she was just sort of pages of notes. And what I remember from the notes, though, were the positives. There were a few moments where she circled things and was just like, did this really just happen? And I was like, all right, I did it. But yeah, getting that sort of editorial experience was wild. And I still have a lot of that text, and I've talked to my publisher, but other people too, about what to do with some of that writing, because some of it kind of stands alone, and I'll figure out a place for some of that later, I think, but because I still really love it. It just wasn't this book. Yeah.
Right. Maybe you could do a sister volume for a sequel.
Something.
Okay, I have one last question for all three of you, which is like, what is something in the writing of your book, or you could talk about the publishing process also, but like something that surprised you, but more, if you could focus on the writing, that's more, I guess, that's more interesting to me. Like, as you were writing or as you were editing, what came up that really surprised you? Who wants to go first? Margot, you're smiling.
I'm smiling because, the answer that floats into my head is sort of like, in every essay, it's almost not working unless there is an element of surprise. I mean, I feel like I start with, something that starts bugging me. I mean, I wrote an essay, the one called A Natural History of Small Town Ohio, and I just heard myself telling these little anecdotes to friends about the weeds in the yard and the things that were happening with the neighbors, and just sort of little stories. And then suddenly they started to seem like maybe they would connect. And I make a list of bullet points, and then you sort of put things together and kind of see, and it takes drafts and moving stuff around before you figure it out. But I'm having a hard time thinking of a specific, like, aha, surprise. But these little moments where you're like, oh, that really works, or, oh, that's cool. And even better if someone else sees it and you're not fully conscious of it. But I always tell students, and I think it's true, like, when those moments happen in your writing, even if it's just like a word that has these connotations that you weren't fully aware of, an image that opens up into metaphor in interesting ways, place, that's when you kind of know things are going right. And I think that's where the aliveness of the writing. I mean, Emanuela, you're talking about your characters. I mean, I used to think it was silly that authors would say things like, my characters decided to go do this thing and I didn't expect it. And you're like, what do you mean? They're your characters. But I wrote a novel and I had exactly that experience of like, no, this was not where I thought it was going to go, but it's the scene that has to come next. And it's the development that has to come next. It makes much more sense than what I thought. So I'm very mistrustful. I think ideas get you in your chair and get you writing. And, it's the discoveries of these connections and layers and patterns and images for me that then brings the writing to life. And I think there is an element of surprise in all of that.
I think there's a little bit of a, I don't know, self-awareness. Okay, so normally when I start a novel or a short story, I have a very clear idea of the theme that is going to be there. Okay, I don't know the details, but I have like a general idea. This is going to be about Israeli society. This is going to be, I had a book about childbirth, but it apparently I'm not fully aware of my own thoughts about this subject. So yes, I think that I know, so I started, but when things start, as I've said, turning into different directions, I would have to admit to myself that there are things there that I was not aware of them in the first place, but they are there. And I have these thoughts, which are sometimes not very comfortable to me, I have to say, but I have to admit it, this is the surprise. Yes, I think this. I don't like to admit it, but I do. Okay, this would be my surprise. Yeah.
I love that.
Great.
For me, it was interesting writing AMERIKALAND. I had told people when people would ask me what it's about, I would kind of give it a little pitch, and I would say, it's a departure. It was very much born of, as I said earlier, like the things that were happening in the U.S. after Trump's first election and all that. And I said, I'd say it's a departure from what I normally write. I normally write kind of family stories, stories about families, about parents, about children, and their relationships and the difficulties and joys therein. And I was about halfway through writing AMERIKALAND, maybe a little more, and I was writing a section, and I just kind of leaned back, and I was like, this is just a family parent story with explosions and terrorism, but it's still just a family story. And it hadn't occurred to me until that moment, and it actually changed the way that I wrote the rest of the book when I recognized that, holy crap, you are writing a family story. The parents are such a huge part. The main character's parents play such a huge role in the book and their relationships. And it had not occurred to me until almost 2/3 of the way through the book that I was still just writing a family story. It just so happened there was a lot of explosions around it. And it really reshaped the way I wrote the rest of the book for the better, I think. But quite a surprise to myself. Maybe not to anybody else, but it was a real surprise to me. Yeah.
That's okay. All right. We are going to wrap things up, but I want to tell you all to save the date. July 27th will be our July Literary Modiin event. Hopefully in person, but also on Zoom for everybody who's can't make it to Modiin. And the hopefully is, according to the Homefront Command guidelines, hopefully by then we'll be able to gather. And so stay tuned for more details about that. But I can share that Tehila Hakimi is one of the speakers. Her novel Hunting in America is coming out like a week before that in English. Okay, and now I'm just gonna share my screen and you can read along with me in the English or the Hebrew as we say the prayer for the hostages, 50 remaining hostages. משברך אבותינו ואמותינו אברהם ושרה יצחק ורבקה יעקב לאה ורחל ואת לוחמנו יהושע דוד יהודה תורה יעל יהודית הוא יברך את שבויי ונעדרי צה"ל והאזרחים והאזרחיות החטופים והחטופות הנתונים והנתונות בשביה ובצרה יהי רצון מלפניך אדוני צבאות שתיתן נפשם משבי תחזירם במהרה לארצם למשפחתם ולביתם בריאים ושלמים בגופם ובנפשם, ותיתן תבונה בלב העמלים לשחרורם, ותיתן רחמים בלב שוביהם. מקוים בהם הכתוב, קול ברמה נשמע נהי בכי, תמרורים רחל מבכה, על בניה מענה, מהנחם על בניה כי איננו. כה אמר אדוני מנהי קולך מבכי ועינייך מדמעה, כי יש שכר לפעולתך נאום אדוני, ושבו מארץ אויב, ויש תקווה לאחריתך נאום אדוני, ושבו בנים ובנות לגבולם. And that is from Sefer Yirmiyahu. Thank you, everyone. I want to give a big thank you to Danny, Emanuela, and Margot, and to all of you for being here with us this evening or this afternoon, wherever you are. And please, may we have a quiet night, quiet week over here in Israel. Yeah, that's it. Besorot tovot, and thank you all again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you
Okay.
so
Thank you,
much.
Julie.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
It was a pleasure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.